pilot refuses Elon Musk on plane. He then buys the airline the moment Elon Musk stepped onto the tarmac. He could feel the weight of the world watching. His jet was delayed, and his patience was wearing thin. He had a meeting that could change the course of technology, and there was no time to waste. As he approached the boarding gate, the last thing he expected was a confrontation with the very person who was supposed to ensure his comfort, the pilot. "Mr. Musk, I'm afraid you can't board this flight," the pilot said, his voice cold and dismissive. Elon's eyes narrowed, a sharp contrast to the calm exterior he usually maintained. "Excuse me?" Elon asked, his voice barely a whisper, but laced with authority. "I'm sorry, sir," the pilot continued, glancing at his clipboard. "You've been flagged by security. We have to follow protocol. You're not allowed to board today." Elon's mind raced. He'd faced challenges before, but this was different. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, and an uncomfortable silence filled the air. There was no logical reason why he couldn't board. No threat, no danger. Just an unexplainable decision, one that made no sense. He took a moment to assess the situation, his mind already working at light speed. This wasn't just a personal inconvenience. It was something bigger, something wrong. And as always, when things felt out of place, Elon wasn't one to back down. His mind flicked through scenarios, but this time, it wasn't about technology or space. It was about power, control, and the way people in high positions could decide who mattered and who didn't. He wasn't going to let this slip by. "All right," Elon said, looking the pilot directly in the eyes, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'll take your word for it. But I promise you, this won't be the last time you see me today." The crowd murmured as Elon turned, not in anger, but with an air of quiet determination. His thoughts raced. This was no ordinary inconvenience. It was an insult, a display of something deeper, and it was about time he showed the world what happens when power gets misused. Within hours, Elon had done something no one expected. The deal was made. The airline? It was his now. And just like that, the very company that had humiliated him would be forced to answer to him. But the real question everyone was asking, what was his true motive? Was this just about revenge, or was there something else at play? Elon Musk wasn't known for his petty acts. No, this was bigger. This was about change. And the world would soon see what would happen when a man who had everything decided to rewrite the rules. But that was just the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to see how this unfolds. You won't believe what Elon Musk does next. The news spread like wildfire. By the time Elon Musk stepped off the tarmac, his phone was already buzzing with messages. His team had been informed about the situation, but this time, something in his gut told him that this wasn't just another inconvenience to brush aside. There was something more personal in the way it all unfolded. The media, of course, was all over it. Headlines screamed, "Elon Musk denied boarding, power play, or personal vendetta." But it wasn't the headlines that kept him up at night. It was the look in the pilot's eyes, that cold dismissal, the way he had treated him like just another passenger, an obstacle to his own timeline, rather than someone who had the power to change the world. "Do you think this will end with a simple purchase?" he muttered to himself, pacing back and forth in his office. The thought of the airline's executives possibly undermining him lingered in his mind. It wasn't about the flight anymore. It was about what the refusal symbolized, the subtle ways in which people like him were still being pushed aside by systems meant to serve everyone. Elon wasn't known for his patience. When something irritated him, he acted fast, with precision. But this felt personal, and deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was a lesson to be learned here, not just for him, but for society as a whole. The next day, the media was abuzz again. Elon Musk buys Airline, issues a statement that shakes the industry. The message was clear. No one was going to dismiss him. But it didn't stop there. Elon wasn't just interested in owning the airline. His true goal was to expose how certain systems were built to operate against the very people they were supposed to help. He had already started assembling a team of experts in aviation and corporate law, setting up a series of meetings with key players from the airline's leadership. But something in his mind kept reminding him that this wasn't about bringing down the company. It was about bringing light to a system that had been broken for far too long. Later that evening, Elon met with one of his closest advisors. The two of them sat across from each other in a private conference room, the tension thick in the air. "Are you sure about this, Elon?" his advisor asked, clearly skeptical. "I mean, the optics aren't great. People are already calling you petty." Elon's lips curled into a half-smile. "Petty? Maybe. But I'm tired of playing nice. The world's too comfortable with ignoring problems until they're too big to fix." His advisor stared at him, unsure how to respond. Elon wasn't just speaking out of frustration. He was thinking on a grand scale, seeing a future where even the smallest injustices were addressed, where the system could be questioned, even if that meant starting with something as seemingly trivial as an airline. What if this was the spark for something bigger? What if this one act of defiance could inspire others to stand up for themselves? Elon's mind raced, the possibilities swirling in his head. He had more power than anyone in that room could ever fathom, but it wasn't the money that drove him. It was the potential to shake the very foundations of society. If something so small could be challenged, then everything else could be too. And that's exactly what he planned to do. By the end of the week, he had made his move. A public statement was released that would leave the world reeling. Elon Musk had just announced that not only would he be taking over the airline's operations, but he was also bringing in a new team of executives who shared his vision of challenging the status quo. The airline's future was now in the hands of someone who had made it his life's work to turn the impossible into reality. But what no one knew, not yet at least, was that this wasn't just about an airline. It was about rewriting the narrative of power, showing the world that when you stand up against the system, anything is possible. And Elon Musk wasn't going to stop until the whole world understood that. The world didn't know what to make of Elon Musk anymore. Some saw him as a hero, others as a villain. But one thing was clear: Elon Musk was never going to back down. The fallout from his airline takeover left the media scrambling, but what they didn't know was that this was just the beginning of a much larger plan. The board of directors from the airline didn't take the news well. Meetings were held behind closed doors, with whispers of lawsuits and threats of retaliation. But Elon didn't fear their power. He understood how the system worked. He had played it long enough to know how to turn it on its head. Inside the walls of his new office at the airline's headquarters, Elon sat, staring at the pile of papers in front of him. It wasn't the paperwork that consumed him, but the implications of it all. The media had portrayed his actions as a petty response to a minor slight, but they missed the deeper issue. This was about a system of power that needed to be questioned. And it wasn't just about the airline anymore. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from one of his close allies. The pilot's been suspended, but the real story isn't about him. It's the system behind him. People need to see it. It's time to act. Elon knew exactly what this meant. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about exposing how the corporate world could crush the spirit of innovation, how the elite used their positions to push others aside. The system that had kept him and others like him in check had finally crossed a line. Now it was his turn to rewrite the rules. The next day, Elon did something that shocked the world again. He called a press conference. The room was packed with reporters, eager to hear what he had to say. But instead of the usual talk about technology and space exploration, Elon had a different message. We live in a world where power is hoarded by a few, where decisions are made in boardrooms and in shadows. I've seen it firsthand. How the system is rigged, how people are pushed aside by those who control the levers. But that ends now. The room fell silent. It wasn't a corporate announcement. It wasn't about new products or innovations. It was a declaration of war against the status quo. I've bought the airline because it was the perfect example of what's wrong with the world. It's not about a plane, a pilot, or an inconvenience. It's about a larger issue. The ways in which we allow those in power to make decisions that affect all of us. We've all been treated as passengers in our own lives, as if we have no say in the direction we're headed. Elon's words were bold, raw, and emotional. For the first time, the world saw him not just as a billionaire tech mogul, but as someone who understood the struggles of the everyday person. His words resonated deeply with those who felt helpless in the face of systems that seemed impossible to change. But that's about to change, Elon continued, his voice gaining strength. I'm going to use this platform, this power, to show the world that no one is untouchable, not even the corporate elites who have shaped this system. The room erupted in murmurs, but Elon's gaze remained steady. He knew what he was doing. He wasn't just challenging the airline. He was challenging an entire industry, an entire system that had existed for decades, and the world would watch, captivated, as the game was about to change forever. Back in his office, Elon reflected on the journey that had led him here. This wasn't about a personal vendetta anymore. It was about making a statement. He had always said that he wanted to make humanity a multiplanetary species, but that dream couldn't come true if the world itself wasn't first made fair and just. This was his next big move, one that would resonate far beyond the airline industry. It was a movement to fight back against the status quo, to show people that they had the power to change the world too. The media would spin it however they liked, but Elon knew the truth. This was bigger than him. This was about creating a ripple that would change everything. And as the press conference ended, Elon Musk knew the world was just beginning to take notice of his message. The game was on. In the days that followed Elon Musk's public statement, the world seemed to hold its breath. Social media exploded with reactions. Supporters called him a visionary, while detractors branded him an egotistical billionaire playing out a personal grudge. But for those who had followed Musk's career, they knew this wasn't about ego. This was about something much larger. The days after the press conference felt like a slow burn. Behind the scenes, Elon's team was working overtime. The airline wasn't just a company to him now. It had become the symbol of everything he stood against. The more he delved into its operations, the more he saw the cracks in the system. The way profits were prioritized over safety. The employees who had been sidelined, their voices drowned out by a boardroom of people too removed from reality to understand the true needs of the passengers they served. Elon was no stranger to disruption. He had done it before. Whether it was with PayPal, Tesla, or SpaceX, he had built his reputation on breaking the rules. But this time, it was different. The stakes were higher. This wasn't just a business venture. This was a call to arms. A battle to reshape an entire industry, to show the world that power could be reclaimed by the people, one company at a time. Late one evening, as the sun set over the sprawling cityscape, Elon sat with his closest advisors. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. There was no urgency in the air, just a calm, steady understanding of the mission at hand. "We need to act fast," one of his senior advisors said, his voice tense. "The media's backlash is growing. We can't let them frame this as a personal attack. This is about making a statement. It's about showing that we don't have to accept the way things are." Elon nodded, his mind already racing. He had anticipated this. The challenge wasn't just in buying the airline. It was in changing its culture, its heart. The world had already seen him take on the tech world, but aviation? That was something new. The challenge was monumental, but Elon was ready. "We're going to make this company the most innovative airline in the world," Elon said, his tone decisive. "We're going to change the way people think about flying. We'll use technology, but more importantly, we'll change the way we treat people. From the pilots to the passengers. No one gets left behind." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and long hours. Elon wasn't just meeting with corporate execs anymore. He was meeting with engineers, pilots, flight attendants, ground crew. He wanted to understand every part of the operation. And then came the moment that turned the tide. Elon Musk made a surprise appearance at one of the airline's terminals, unannounced. The employees didn't know what to expect. Was he there to fire someone? Was he there to make another announcement? Instead, he walked through the terminal, quietly observing, listening to the workers, hearing their stories. He spoke to the gate agents, the baggage handlers, the cabin crew. For the first time in years, they felt seen. One flight attendant, who had been with the airline for over 20 years, approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Musk, you're doing something amazing here," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But don't forget the heart of the airline, the people who make it run." Elon paused, looking at her with a softness in his eyes that many hadn't expected. "I won't forget," he said. "This isn't just about planes. It's about the people who fly on them. It's about the people who make them run. And it's about time that everyone realizes that." The flight attendant nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. In that moment, Elon Musk wasn't just a billionaire CEO. He was a man who understood the pulse of the people. But the story didn't end there. In the coming weeks, the airline underwent a complete overhaul. New policies were introduced. Employee benefits were dramatically improved. But the real change was the shift in culture. The board of directors, who had once been cold and calculating, were forced to adapt to Elon's way of thinking. The company was no longer a corporate machine. It was a community, a family, united in the mission to make flying not just a service, but an experience that everyone could be proud of. As the transformation continued, the media began to take notice. The headlines were no longer about Elon's personal vendetta or his petty revenge. Instead, they were about a billionaire who had used his power to change an industry, to put people first, and to show the world that there was a better way. And it wasn't just about the airline anymore. It was a message to every corporation, every industry, and every individual who felt powerless against the system. Change was possible. Elon Musk had taken a stand, and the world was watching. Months passed, and the once struggling airline began to emerge as something entirely new. The transformation was remarkable, almost surreal. The people who had once been disillusioned, resigned to the chaotic, impersonal world of commercial aviation, were now energized. Passengers noticed the difference too. The smiles on the flight attendants' faces were genuine, the pilots were more attentive, and even the ground crew seemed to work with a sense of purpose they hadn't felt in years. But Elon's journey wasn't over yet. He knew that real change didn't happen overnight. While the company was heading in the right direction, there was still one thing that loomed over him: the public perception. The media storm that had surrounded him after the initial incident hadn't died down. In fact, it had only grown. The question that the world kept asking was, why? Why did Elon Musk buy the airline? Was it just about the personal slight? Or was there something deeper driving him? Was he trying to show the world that power could be used for good? Elon knew that these questions needed answers. He needed to address the elephant in the room, once and for all. And the perfect opportunity came when he was invited to appear on one of the biggest news shows in the country. The host was known for his tough questions and hard-hitting interviews, but Elon was prepared. The moment the interview began, the host didn't waste time. "Elon, let's get straight to it," he said, leaning forward with an almost accusatory tone. "You bought an airline after a single incident where a pilot refused you entry onto a plane. Now, the world is asking, was this just about personal pride? Or is there something more to this story?" Elon's eyes narrowed slightly, his face calm and composed. He had been asked this question 100 times before, but something about this moment felt different. He wasn't just answering for himself anymore. He was speaking for the thousands of employees, the millions of passengers, and anyone who had ever felt powerless against a system that treated them as just another number. "It wasn't just about the plane," Elon said, his voice steady but firm. "It was about the system, the way people are treated, how their needs and voices get drowned out by corporate greed. I saw that, and I knew I had the power to change it. So I did." The host seemed taken aback by the answer, but he pressed on. "But isn't it a little extreme? To buy an entire airline because of one bad experience?" Elon's gaze hardened. Sometimes, to create real change, you have to be extreme. The airline industry wasn't just broken, it was corrupt. Pilots, crew members, and passengers alike were at the mercy of a system that didn't care about them. I had the resources, and more importantly, I had the vision to turn it around. For a moment, there was silence in the studio. The host shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had been expecting a typical answer, a dismissal, perhaps a justification for the money. But what he heard instead was raw, unfiltered truth. Elon leaned forward, his voice lowering with intensity. "People often ask me why I do what I do. It's simple. I want to create a future where no one has to settle for less, where the system works for them, not against them." The host's expression softened. He could see it now. This wasn't a billionaire playing a power game. This was a man who believed in something much bigger than himself. As the interview ended, Elon stood up and walked off the set, his mind already racing toward the next step. The airline was no longer just a symbol of personal victory. It had become a beacon of hope. The media couldn't ignore it anymore. They had no choice but to report on the remarkable turnaround that had taken place. They had no choice but to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, Elon Musk was onto something bigger than any of them had imagined. But the story was far from over. The world was watching, and so was the aviation industry. As the days passed, a ripple effect began to unfold. Other companies started to take notice. Employees from rival airlines reached out, asking how they could be a part of this new vision. The public, too, was eager to see how far Elon Musk would take this revolution. Would he continue to push the boundaries of what was possible? Or was this just another one of his high-profile experiments that would eventually fizzle out? Elon Musk had created a spark that was starting to spread, reaching the farthest corners of the aviation world. People were no longer just flying from one place to another. They were part of something bigger. They were part of a movement. And Elon? He was just getting started. As the months passed, Elon's vision for the airline continued to take shape, and the world began to notice. It wasn't just about making the airline profitable. It was about proving a point that no one had dared to make before. Elon wasn't in this for the headlines or the business success. He was in it for the long-term impact on society. The airline, once on the brink of collapse, had now become a case study in how far an individual could go to challenge the status quo. And the most unexpected part? It wasn't just the airline's employees or its passengers that were benefiting from this transformation. It was the entire aviation industry that was starting to take notes. Rivals who had once laughed at Elon's decision to buy the airline now found themselves scrambling to match the standards he had set. But for Elon, the journey wasn't about outdoing anyone. It was about giving people something they didn't even know they needed: respect, fairness, and a glimpse into a world where profit didn't overshadow human connection. One evening, as he sat in his private office at the airline's headquarters, Elon received a call. It was from the same pilot who had once refused him boarding months ago. The man's voice was shaky, almost hesitant. "Mr. Musk," he began, I just wanted to apologize for what happened that day. I had no idea who you were. And to be honest, I didn't think anyone would care about one man being turned away from a flight. But I was wrong." Elon listened quietly, a small smile forming on his lips. He wasn't the type to hold grudges. "I understand," he replied calmly. "It was a mistake, but it turned into something much bigger than any of us anticipated. What matters now is that we can all do better, for each other and for the people who trust us." The pilot's voice trembled with emotion. "I've seen the changes at the airline, and it's not just about better pay or perks. People feel valued now. You've changed everything. And I just wanted to say thank you." Elon paused for a moment, the weight of the conversation sinking in. It wasn't the apology that mattered. What mattered was that, in his own way, the pilot had come to realize the importance of his actions. That one refusal, though harsh at the time, had sparked a movement that was shifting the way people thought about business, about leadership, and about respect. As Elon hung up the phone, he leaned back in his chair and looked out the window at the horizon. The stars were just beginning to appear, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. The world was changing, slowly, but undeniably, and he had played a part in it. He knew there was still work to do, still challenges to face. But for once, Elon Musk didn't feel like he was fighting against the world. He felt like he was fighting for something bigger, something that transcended personal victories or financial gains. He was fighting for a future where the system was built to serve people, not the other way around. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the story of the pilot and the airline became more than just a news cycle. It became a symbol of change, a reminder that even in a world full of setbacks and disappointments, there was always room for a second chance. And sometimes, that second chance was all it took to spark a revolution. The airline didn't just grow in size, it grew in meaning. The world had watched as Elon Musk turned an impossible situation into an undeniable force for good. And now, more than ever, people were paying attention. For Elon, the battle wasn't over. But with every step he took, he knew he was on the right path. The future he envisioned was becoming a reality, one flight, one person, one moment at a time. The world wasn't ready for what was coming next, but that was exactly how he wanted it.